Greg, before we went to break, we were talking about biblical books and how these self-empowering books were taken out. And I do notice that in the New Testament, and you have Jesus walking around and doing his ministry, there are hints at it, but they're subtle messages that are easy to skip along. There are very self-empowering terms there, but people, because the other books aren't there, because the other seeds haven't been planted there, kind of skip over them.
Sure.
You know what I mean?
Oh, absolutely. You know, and it's. I think any of our listeners who have ever read our biblical text will have a sense that although it's a good text, it feels like something's missing, that's incomplete. And the best scholars, the best biblical scholars of our time, freely and openly admit that our biblical text, it's a good text, and it is incomplete. A perfect example is in the book of Genesis. In our King James Version, we've got about a sentence that talks about the origin of humankind. It says that, God created man from the dust of the earth, breathed the breath of life into the nostrils of man, and man became a living being, which is all accurate. But it's tremendously condensed, and when you go back into the original text before the edits, Steve, it's amazing that they were originally scrolls. These weren't bound books, and there's paragraph after paragraph, column after column in these scrolls that have now been recovered that talk about how we were created and how our souls are created separately from our bodies, and how the first bodies of humankind couldn't hold the power of God's light, what is called God's light, or the soul, or a higher consciousness or a higher dimension, or whatever language we want to use, that the body had to be the perfect recipe for our DNA, had to be discovered to hold that power in this world, and we miss all that. And this is, to me, part of the value of going back into the texts that were edited. And I wasn't in that council, and maybe there were good reasons, and maybe not, as to whether or not they were included in the actual biblical text. What I believe is whether they're in the Bible or not, they're valuable, and that we should have access to them for our own reading edification, just to flesh out the story, whether they're actually part of the Bible or not.
Which was the original intent. I mean, these were written by people who were sharing this tradition. The actual edit was more of a political move. The fact that it was a council, tells you that it was a political move, and it took away, the edit served its purpose, but the original intent was just to share this wisdom.
It was a council. It was a largely male council and a male-dominated religion. It was a new religion that they were trying to really bring the world into this single focus of this way of looking at things. And I've had the opportunity to read some of the letters from the bishops that were involved in this editing process, and even they, in their time in the 4th century, they questioned. They asked the question. They said, "What if this thing called the Bible catches on? And what if this new belief called Christianity gets popular? What are the implications of us taking this material out?" So we acknowledge that they were humans and that this has happened. Now, the question you asked right after the break was, even in the New Testament, which is also good and also incomplete, when we go back into some of the other documents, such as the Gospel of Thomas, which we find, I've actually been to Egypt and seen the original manuscript, and it's a beautiful manuscript written largely in Greek, in Old Greek.
It's kind of like a best of Jesus.
It is. It's as if someone were following Jesus, a scribe, and every time he said something, really cool, he said, "Master, say it again so I can write it down."
Right.
The words of Jesus. But what Jesus says when we go back into the Gospel of Thomas and other documents, these are not relegated only to Christian documents, but in the words that are so very clear, Jesus is telling us about prayer. And what he's saying is that prayer is a language that communicates with this intelligent energy that he calls the Father. And he says, when you want something in your life, if you want health, if you want abundance, his words are actually be surrounded. He says be. It's not what we do. Be surrounded. Be enveloped by these things so that your desire can be full. And when we be, that's the feeling. as if our healing has already happened, or the feeling as if our abundance, our spiritual, our material abundance is already there, or the feeling as if peace has already happened in our world. And what we now know, people say, well, this is subject to interpretation, it's very subjective, and I would agree as a scientist. However, the flip side of this now is that our own science, under laboratory conditions, are validating these principles that when we feel a certain way in our bodies, not only does it change the chemistry inside of our bodies to create either healing or the opposite of the healing, it goes both ways, but that we literally change the atomic and the molecular structure of physical matter beyond our bodies through this language of human emotion. And this is just an awesome realization. I'm surprised it hasn't made the cover of Time magazine and CNN, but I'm also not surprised because the discoveries, Steve, they're shared in such complex scientific language, a lot of people just don't understand, what these experiments are actually showing.
Which is why things like I was mentioning earlier, things like your book are so helpful.